Good afternoon. Today at Oakton EMT, we're going to talk about the skill set of oxygen administration. The equipment that we're going to be using for oxygen administration today is the oxygen cylinder, the non-rebreather mask, the nasal cannula, the O2 regulator, and then the oxygen key. The oxygen key will be used pending on the type of O2 cylinder / bottle that we have. And then the guest of honor, our CPR mannequin, which will be providing the supplemental O2 onto. BSI scene safety. The scene is safe. We're going to continue on with our further assessment of our patient, and we're going to apply supplemental O2 for our patient. Before we actually give the supplemental O2 is we're going to evaluate the oxygen tank. We're going to look for three things: dings, dents, and deformities. So I'm going to look at my O2 tank, make sure there's no dings, there's no dents, and then there's no deformities, making sure it's operational for the use. Before I apply the regulator to the patient, I'm going to look for two things in my regulator. I'm going to look for something called the pin index system, and then I'm going to look to make sure I have a present O-ring. Once I've determined and confirmed the presence of the pin index system and the O-ring, I'm going to take my oxygen cylinder, I'm going to crack it open to purge any dust and particulates out of the actual O2 cylinder itself. Take my regulator, line up the pin index system, attach it, make sure the regulator is hand tight. Making sure my flow meter is at 0, I'm going to open up my tank all the way. As I'm opening up my tank, I'm going to look for listen, and feel for three different things. I'm going to look to see how much pressure I have in my tank. Currently, I have 1500 PSI. I'm going to inform my instructor I have 1500 PSI. I'm going to listen and I'm going to feel. I'm listening to hear any air leak, and I'm feeling to feel if any air leak is around the stem. Currently, I hear nothing, and currently, I feel nothing. Now I'm able to prepare to administer oxygen, supplemental oxygen to my patient. The first form of oxygen we're going to give our patient is 15 liters via non-rebreather mask. Some of the books that you'll read will tell you between 10 to 12 to 15. Max is 15. Patient will receive approximately 90% supplemental O2 for this. As you're turning on the regulator to 15 liters, you're going to depress the little valve inside the mask, filling up the reservoir bag, making sure it fully inflates before you apply it to your patient. Once you apply it to your patient, make sure it goes over his ears, and then you pull the little strings to make sure it's nice and snug, to make sure your patient actually has a good fit on the non-rebreather mask. Another tell that you may see that on this non-rebreather mask is you may see condensation on the mask, and you may see the bag inflating and deflating at the same time. How is my patient tolerating the non-rebreather mask at this moment?
Your patient can no longer tolerate the non-rebreather.
At this moment, because my patient can no longer tolerate it, I'm going to turn off the regulator and remove the non-rebreather mask from my patient. Though my patient still needs a form of supplemental O2, the next form of oxygen I will be administering to this patient is a nasal cannula. So you have some of the literature that talks about the nasal cannula between 1 to 6 or 2 to 6 liters. Depending on the book that you use, we use 2 to 6 liters. With this, you always start off low and then you always progress up, depending on how the overall condition of the patient is, meaning how the patient's parameters are, as well as how their O2 saturation is. Prongs are always going to go into the patient's nose, wrap around the ears, and then you pull this tab nice and tight, making sure the oxygen, the nasal cannula is on very snug for your patient. Be mindful when you're administering this nasal cannula to your patient's going to receive between 24 to 44% supplemental O2. If, again, the patient's condition doesn't improve, you just dial it up 2 more liters to a total of 4 liters.
This concludes the skill.
At this moment, I will turn off my flow meter, remove the nasal cannula from my patient, take the nasal cannula off the regulator, close my tank, open the flow meter to release all the pressure that's in the tank, turn off my flow meter, remove the regulator from the bottle, lay the bottle on its side as the scenario has completed. Well, that concludes our demonstration for the skill scenario of oxygen administration. A few of the few takeaways that we always want to make sure that you accomplish so you don't get those critical failures. One is always is that BSI scene safety, always making sure you have your proper PPE on, as well as making sure the scene is safe before you do any type of patient care. Next is making sure that you properly assemble the O2 bottle in conjunction with the O2 regulator, making sure you have that O-ring present in the regulator. Two other big takeaways is making sure you use the proper oxygen for the non-rebreather mask, as well as making sure you fill the reservoir bag, and then the proper oxygen administration for the nasal cannula. And as always, if you like us, follow us at Oakton EMT. Thank you and have a great day.